When I first met Thomas, I thought I had finally found the kind of man who could give me stability. He was kind, soft-spoken, steady in a way that made me feel safe. He wasn't flashy or loud, not the type to dominate a room. But there was this quiet confidence about him that drew me in. He was a widower, which he told me early on. His wife Emily had passed away from breast cancer 2 years before, and while the grief was still visible in the corners of his eyes, he seemed like someone who wanted to move forward. At first, I thought I could handle it. Everyone comes with a past. I told myself it was no different than dating someone who'd been divorced. But I didn't really understand what it meant to love someone who had already loved someone else so deeply. Emily wasn't just a memory. She was woven into every part of his life. And I couldn't help but notice it. Her photos were still up in the house when I first came over. Not just tucked away in a hallway. Big framed portraits in the living room, smiling candid shots on the nightstand, vacation pictures pinned to the fridge. At dinner, I'd open a cookbook and find her handwriting in the margins. At family events, people would share stories about her like she had just stepped out of the room. His mother-in-law still called him every week, bringing over casseroles and pies on Emily's birthday. Even his co-workers spoke about her like she was unforgettable, the kind of woman everyone admired. At first, I played along. I smiled when they shared stories. I nodded when they said I reminded them of her. I told myself it was normal, that this was just part of dating someone with history. But the truth was, the longer we were together, the more invisible I felt. It wasn't just that Emily had existed. It was that she seemed to exist more brightly than me, even though she was gone. The first time I really cracked was during dinner at a nice Italian restaurant. I'd worn a necklace Thomas had given me for my birthday, something small and delicate. The waiter complimented it, and before I could even say thank you, Thomas smiled and said, "Emily had a necklace just like that. She wore it all the time." My smile froze. I felt like my face was burning. I laughed politely, but inside I was screaming. Couldn't I just have one thing that was mine? Later that night, I brought it up. I told him it bothered me when he compared me to her. He looked stunned, then sad. He said, "I wasn't comparing you. I was remembering." But that didn't make it better. If anything, it made me feel more like a placeholder, someone he was tolerating while keeping her alive through stories. Over the months, it built up. Every time her name slipped into conversation, it was like a jab. At Christmas, when his family hung up stockings and still included one for Emily, I wanted to scream. At New Year's, when his friends toasted to Emily, who we miss every day, I forced a smile while swallowing jealousy that made me sick. It wasn't just about her. It was about me feeling like I would never matter as much. The breaking point came one night when we were sitting on the couch, planning a trip. He suggested a beach town, then casually mentioned, "Emily always wanted to go there." That was it. I snapped. I told him he needed to stop bringing her up, that it wasn't fair to me, that I couldn't keep competing with a dead woman. His face went pale. He said, "She's not competition. She was my wife." And the words spilled out before I could stop them. "Yeah, and now she's just baggage." The silence that followed was like nothing I'd ever felt before. He looked at me with an expression I will never forget. Shock, hurt, and something colder. He didn't yell. He didn't even argue. He just stood up, walked into the other room, and closed the door. The next few days were unbearable. He barely spoke to me. When he did, his voice was clipped, formal. Finally, he sat me down and said, "If you can't respect that Emily was part of my life, then we don't have a future." I panicked. I apologized, told him I was just insecure, that I didn't mean it. He nodded, but I could see it in his eyes. Something had shifted. We stayed together another year. He even proposed, and for a while I thought that meant we'd moved past it. But I could feel the distance. He was still kind, still steady, but colder. He no longer told me stories about Emily, but not because he had forgotten her. Because he no longer trusted me to handle it. And that silence was worse. I knew that one sentence, calling her baggage, was lodged in his mind, poisoning everything. I tried to make it work. I tried to smile through the family gatherings, through the way his friends still toasted her name, through the way his mother-in-law still treated me like an outsider. But my resentment leaked out in little ways. I'd sigh when he answered a call from her mother. I'd roll my eyes when a friend shared a memory. Once I even muttered, "Here we go again," when someone brought her up at a dinner party. That was the night everything ended. His late wife's best friend Hannah was there. She had been Emily's maid of honor, and now she was a lawyer. I never liked her. She always looked at me like she could see straight through me. That night, she heard my muttered comment. Later, she pulled me aside and said, "You don't get to belittle her. You don't get to erase her." I snapped back, saying Emily wasn't here anymore and that I was his future. Hannah's expression didn't change. She just said, "If you really believed that, you wouldn't be so threatened." A week later, Thomas came home with papers. Divorce papers. We'd only been married a year. He said he couldn't do it anymore. That marriage was supposed to be about love and partnership, not resentment and erasure. I begged him to reconsider, cried, promised I'd change. He shook his head. Then he delivered the final humiliation. I asked Hannah to represent me. That cut deeper than anything. His late wife's best friend, who had already seen me at my worst, was now his lawyer. She knew every word I'd ever spat in jealousy. She knew I'd called Emily baggage. And now she would use all of it against me. The divorce wasn't complicated financially. We hadn't built much together. But emotionally, it destroyed me. Hannah was ruthless in court, painting me as unstable, selfish, incapable of respecting Thomas's past. And the worst part? She didn't even have to exaggerate. She just repeated my own words. Now I'm 34, divorced, sitting in a one-bedroom apartment filled with second-hand furniture, while Thomas is out living a life that looks like freedom. He attends charity events honoring Emily's memory, smiling in photos with her family and friends. He looks lighter, freer, like cutting me out was the final step in his healing. The irony is painful. I called Emily baggage, but in the end, I'm the one he dropped. I thought if I erased her, I could secure my place in his life. Instead, I erased myself. And maybe that's the lesson I'll never escape. When you try to tear down someone else's memory, you end up destroying your own future.